Our political panel is here at the desk with me. Stef Kight is a politics reporter at Axios. Jake Traylor returning to the desk. I'm glad to say that. White House reporter for Politico. Great to have you both here. So I'm going to update the table on some news from President Trump made just a couple of minutes ago. There was an event that opened up at the White House. He took some questions and said he would not fire Federal Reserve Chair Jay Powell. Just wants him to lower interest rates faster than currently indicated. That seems to be important, and I want to play some sound for you that came from this morning on CNBC from European Central Bank head Christine Lagarde. Let's listen.
If there is an attempt by the executive branch in this country to fire Chair Powell before the end of his term, do you see that as a material risk to markets?
I very much hope not.
Hope that doesn't happen.
Hope that it is not a risk.
What would it mean for the markets?
Look, I'm not going to comment on, market reaction to hypotheticals that I hope are just not on the table.
3 times, hope not, hope not, hope not. And clearly the president is trying to, with his remarks late this afternoon that just came in, send some signals that though he's aggravated, he's not going to push that fire button.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating that the president decided to clarify that, because it has been sounding like he was moving in that direction, that he was going to continue
creating
to put
all
pressure.
sorts of alarms.
Of course, and we haven't seen Trump. He's not one to back down from a fight usually, and I do think there was some concern there when he saw stock markets already reacting just to the possibility of this happening. It is something that Trump cares about. The markets are already in a state of fluctuation over tariffs and other issues that he's had, and so it seems to be an indication that he was watching that, he was listening, and wanted to do something to try to stabilize the situation, at least temporarily.
And Jake, there are lots of days that we could circle on the calendar in the first 100 days of the second Trump administration, but it feels to me like this one may be one we want to double circle. Here's why. The president's remarks just then, trying to clarify what his intentions are about the Federal Reserve Chairman, and also the Treasury Secretary, though behind closed doors, telling investors this confrontation economically with China is unsustainable. We are in an effective trade embargo, and we are going to try to reach a deal. It was less than a week ago the president said China doesn't have the cards.
Yeah.
They're going to come crawling. This sounds like a reset day to me.
We've been seeing a lot of back and forth over the past week or so. I mean, Trump called Powell a major loser. I think it was days ago. And so this is
yesterday.
Yesterday. So it feels like 3 weeks. But quite the shift. And it gets to the point of who's in Donald Trump's ear right now. We know he watches the markets. We know that he cares about voter sentiment, even if he says he doesn't. So the question is, who's getting in his ear? Because obviously, at least his public strategy is changing moment by moment, day by day.
And even tariffs. I mean, we already saw him walk back some of the initial tariffs that he had announced, and now we're seeing them concerned about the China tariffs. And the question about Trump's tariff policy has always been how long he would be willing to test his theory of the case. He has an idea about tariffs that is contrary to what most economic experts believe to be the case. He wanted to move forward with it anyway, but it's clear that the markets were reacting. People are nervous.
And there was a meeting at the White House with top retailer CEOs. And then there's this remarks today from Bessent about China and the unsustainability, and the president about Jay Powell. I have to believe those are more than coincidentally connected.
There's an art of making the deal, which is what Trump loves to claim he's doing. But then there's also the fact that we have Americans whose pocketbooks are hurting. And even in the town halls that we just referenced just a moment ago, that's something that voters are very upset about. And so there's this balance, there's this tightrope he's trying to walk, and someone's pulling him back a little bit here.
And Jake, evaluate from your reporting the Pete Hegseth situation, the questions, the scrutiny, the competence, and the White House solidarity.
Yeah, I actually, at the Easter egg roll yesterday, I asked Trump if he still has complete confidence in Hegseth, and he kind of laughed and said, why would you even ask that question? Of course I have complete confidence in him. But at the same time, I was talking to a close Trump ally recently who said Trump supports people publicly until the moment he doesn't. And I think his first administration is a good example of that. And another close Trump ally was telling some of my colleagues at Politico this quote about Hegseth specifically. He said, central casting can become problematic if all they're doing is generating questions of instability. So Trump's going to continue to support Hegseth, at least publicly. We know he's done it privately until the breaking point. The question is now, where is that breaking point? Because things are not looking good over at the Pentagon.
Steph, any insight into that?
I mean, I think it's interesting, to your point, look at the Matt Gaetz for Attorney General situation, right? We saw everyone was going to back Matt Gaetz. They were serious about it. This wasn't a joke. there was all the support, all the MAGA influencers online were coming out of the woodwork defending him until the moment where it was clear that that wasn't going to happen. And then all of a sudden, the nominee was pulled. And do we reach that point?
Right. This one feels different because the White House exerted tremendous pressure to get the confirmation across the finish line. It wasn't certain. They've invested a lot of political capital. It feels like they don't want to pull that political capital back or concede a defeat this early on.
And I do think the president appreciates kind of Hegseth's kind of aggressive approach with the media, really pushing back. And, that is something that Trump wants to see. And we've seen that kind of become Hegseth's playbook. Like earlier on when it looked like Hegseth's nomination was in jeopardy, that was Trump's message to him then. Fight this. We want to see you out there. He's doing that again. But how many times is the White House going to allow Hegseth to pull them back into scandal? We also know the president doesn't like to be outshined by anyone else in his cabinet. And does that become an issue down the road?
Jake, your thoughts on Byron Donalds? Look, some House Republicans have decided not to hold town halls, have teletown halls, Zoom meetings. He's out there doing it. That's a way of engaging with the constituents, taking a lot of feedback. Your sense of what we saw play out last night?
Yeah, so I think it's worth looking at. So the Democrats, they have been hosting town halls frequently, and that's because they are a self-declared party in somewhat crisis right now, trying to figure out who they are. So they've been having a lot of these town halls. Republicans haven't been having as many. But what's interesting is whenever a Republican does have a town hall, they are the ones who have been elected into leadership right now. They have the majority. They have the executive branch. And so there's a bit more of higher stakes when it comes to the fact that these constituents, when they're not pleased, they have one person to look at, and it is these elected Republican leaders, which I find really interesting. We saw some of that at the Donalds town hall last night. Look, people elected Donald Trump to lower prices, and they're not seeing that. That's hitting their pocketbooks. They also, and we know this from polling, Doge itself among Republicans polls well. Elon Musk himself and his unchecked authority does not. And so we heard a lot of the voicing from Republican constituents last night saying this is not the person I necessarily elected and what they're doing right now.
Jake Traylor, Stef Kight, thanks so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.